Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there. Hey everybody, this is Brian back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And today I've got with me Joshua Cameron. And Joshua is a Utah native, born and raised. He joined the Army at the age of 19, where 8 days after September 11th, he deployed to his first war zone in the Balkans. While he was there, he was recognized for valor and service by the Joint Chief of Staff, the highest ranking officer in the U.S. Later, he deployed to Kuwait and Iraq, and even has a comical stand-up comedy bit about how terrible the conditions were for soldiers there. He spent the last 10 plus years in the medical field, from combat medic to pediatric medical research and data analytics, where he worked on the largest longitudinal study of his kind while he's at the University of Utah. He now helps people who suffer from chronic pain in their minds and their bodies, and helps them find a pain-free life by guiding them to a place of perfect health. So with that, I want to welcome to Grief to Growth, Joshua Cameron.
Oh, wow. Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you holding the space here.
Yeah, it's good to meet you. You've got an interesting background, and how did you get into helping other people with their pain, though?
Well, there's a long journey, right? We often, really, we can only see the world from, a place of who we are. And so if we are stuck in grief, well, then all we're going to see is grief, and there's really no room to help others. And, I've had, in order for me to hide, as a child, as a survival mechanism to hide from the grief of growing up in an abusive household, I really, buried myself in a lot of fantasy novels. And in those fantasy novels are people who are, given a, monumental task that, they probably didn't want to do it. And it was very difficult for them. It was very scary for them. And yet they stepped up and did it anyway. And so I really resonated with that, which then, brought me to this idea of, I'd really like to help out. I'd really like to add value. Now, the problem is that if we don't know how to help ourselves, well, we're going to be clumsy at best at helping others as well. And so I really had to learn how to help myself, and took a lot of chaos, whether it be, from, going from, child abuse and, both mental and physical, to then, PTSD, just, the different things that you can't unsee, in a war zone, and just how that wreaks havoc on relationships. And as that falls apart, I realized that all the walls that I erected, in order to protect me, what they did was, I erected these walls to be like, hey, hide me from this pain. Well, the problem is the wall doesn't discriminate. So if there's anything that's good coming my way, it's going to block that as well. And that's usually why people go through the dark night of the soul and everything changes, because during the dark night of the soul, which is where, typically people feel like their life is kind of falling apart, well, all the walls collapsed. And when all the walls collapse, well, then the heart is open and it can actually, receive the signal. And then from there, just found the idea of when the student is ready, the master appears. That certainly happened in my life, and had a chain of them. Some I found on YouTube, some I actually paid for, quite handsomely for, mentorship and guidance. And it's been a very fascinating road since then.
Yeah. So you're also in the medical field. So how does what you do, helping people with chronic pain, relate to like just the traditional medical training?
Well, so the traditional medical training, you have the Hippocratic Oath, right? Do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is we've abandoned that, right? Because we've abandoned that for a very, very long time. I mean, unfortunately, the medical system, I was very blind to it. Medical system is no different than any other organization, right? It's very susceptible to just doing the bidding of their largest donors. And back when my mom was young, well, what those donors said is, hey, pregnant woman, you should smoke because it's healthy. And then later on, they said, hey, person who wants to eat well and be healthy, you should cut out all that fat and replace it with sugar. And then they said, oh, hey, you in chronic pain, why don't you go ahead and take these opioids because they're completely safe and non-addictive. And, hey, why don't you go ahead and take this experimental, whatever, and and so that really woke me up to, oh, okay, so we're not really here to help. I mean, the ER is like acute pain's amazing, right? Our acute pain system, acute care system, you break your arm, you have a heart attack, you have a stroke. We're incredible at that. But when it comes to chronic conditions, it's just, oh, well, here's a pill. Oh, you've got, downstream effects, you've got side effects. Well, we've got another pill for that. So we call that a win. And so trying to, help others and, working in pediatrics, right? The longitudinal study I was a part of was called ECHO, environmental influences in child health outcomes. And the point of that is to look at a whole lot of different variables, right? There were a whole, conglomerate of studies, packed into one. And one of those was, a group of ladies who were trying to get pregnant. And as they're trying to get pregnant, well, they're giving a lot of urine tests. And in those urine tests, they're testing for phthalates and, BPA. And then here we are, bringing their kids in, 8, 10 years later. And then we're taking pictures of their teeth and we're correlating, okay, how much BPA was in their urine. And then we correlate it to, okay, are their teeth breaking down? And can we create this correlation of, the hormone disruptors and the, endocrine system disruptors and tie it to, or at least suggest that this is something, that could be causal or at least should be, looked into further. We take blood samples, we take microbiome samples, height and weight, go through a whole list of, genetic questionnaires. And so it really got me to, okay, well, this is amazing. Man, I'm helping kids for one. This is great. It was a lot of fun. And then when the pandemic happened, the hospitals were the most backwards. They seemed to be the ones that weren't following the science. They seemed to be the ones that were the most just trying to make everyone afraid. And that was really strange for me. Our hospital here, when, at the University of Utah, where I was working, when everyone quit wearing masks and they said, oh, by the way, it looks like masks actually don't work. The hospital took like 6 months before they quit wearing masks, as if they wanted everyone to be afraid. And then when I started doing a little bit of research, like hospitals, the third leading cause of death. It's like, what? And okay, well then I have got some really, strong questions to ask myself. Is this something I want to be a part of? Right? And is there a better way to help? And by being able to ask myself better questions, well, it leads me to better paths. And I'm not saying that doctors are the problem. Doctors are just part of a system. And, and so chances are, you run into a doctor, he probably wants to be able to help out. Now, that said, he's very confined. He or she are very confined by, what the insurance agency is going to carve out for the amount of time, what the pharmaceutical, company is going to say what they're allowed to do. And so, they're victims to the same system. And I didn't necessarily want to be a part of that. And so just in search of something better, I found Peter Sage, who taught me about consciousness. He was the youngest trainer for Tony Robbins back in the day. And Tony Robbins is really good for, helping people get from a place of feeling like they're victims to then, hey, I'm going to go seize the world. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to swim upstream and make my dreams happen. And Peter's more of a flow state and much more of a, kind of a Taoist Buddhist, though he wouldn't necessarily say that, right? He's not really religious, but much more allow it to happen. Tune into higher vibrations and attract those, and then take inspired action in order to make that manifest in the world. And then, from there, because of my affinity towards helping and my affinity towards, healing, it may not have necessarily been healing in the medical field, but that's effectively the way I identified. Well, then a master healer came into my world. I thought he was bizarre at first, but since I just learned all this stuff about consciousness, how, the brain works through neuroscience, through psychology, how even, scientists back in the 20s, talked about how consciousness is primary, right? Max Planck, consciousness is primary. Niels Bohr, everything that we call real is made up of things that cannot be considered as real. Say, okay, so we already discovered back in the 20s that we live in a matrix, right? That everything we call particle matter reality is made up of collapsed light waves. That everything's empty space, everything's energy. And okay, well, let me give this guy a try. Let me listen to him, at least suspend my need to believe or disbelieve, because it seems very bizarre. It's challenging my model of the world. And then from there, just having that ability to say, instead of dogmatically assigning a belief system, well, that challenges my identity, that challenges the way I believe. And instead of doing what I've done so long and stick in the logical frame of mind and just fold my arms like a toddler, be like, no, I don't like those vegetables I've never tried. No, I don't like those ideas I've never tried. Right? I then said, okay, well, what if I try them? How do I know?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, something I want to tell you about today. My podcast platform, Buzzsprout, has recently made it easier for me to allow you to support me financially. Go to www.grieftogrowth.com/subscribe. That's grief2growth.com/subscribe. And once you're there, you can sign up to support me financially. Now, you can do it for as little as $3 a month, or of course, as much as you'd like. If you do that, you'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll see those in the regular feed. They'll have a lock on them. But when you become a subscriber, you'll actually get access to your own private feed, and you'll be able to listen to the regular podcast along with the bonus podcast for the subscribers. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I want to thank those of you who support me financially. Have a great day, and on to the episode. So why do you think that that Western or traditional medicine is so poor at handling chronic conditions, specifically chronic pain? Because I know people that have had, myalgia, fibromyalgia, and different diseases, and they're told it's all in your head, it's not real, and we dismiss those people.
Because the people at the top have no interest in healing those at the bottom, because if you're sick and you can't really, it's hard for you to pay your bills, it's hard for you to take care of yourself, you feel like you're crazy. Well, guess what you're going to do? You're going to give your power over to somebody else. And who are you going to give your power over to? Well, whoever's right there conveniently telling you that they know with a certainty that they can help. And whether that's a politician, right? Whether that's a pharmaceutical, system, we're one of, I think, 2 nations in the world that allow for the types of pharmaceutical, commercials to even air on public TV, and pays for about 75%, give or take, of the commercial income for these channels. And so it's really nothing more than a business model that's based on profit first, no matter what. And if people get benefit, well, then that's a happy consequence. And I think that really boils down to that.
I hate to believe that, and I've resisted believing that for a very long time. But the older I get and the more I see, it's undeniable. And it's not just me. I guess I'm looking at these commercials on TV for these pharmaceuticals for these bizarre conditions that it seems like very few people would have. I wouldn't know how the ads pay out anyway. And then they give you the list of all the side effects, right? It's like, I think I'd rather have the disease. But I'm like, why are you advertising prescription drugs to people that don't have access to them, right? I have to go to a doctor to get them. So yeah. It's a weird system.
Yeah. Well, it's a way to condition us, right? Why, if you watch CNN, is there maybe an ad for Boeing? Are you going to go out and buy a 7047, Brian? Right. It's a way to condition us to be like, oh, well, these are safe, and in kind of the same way, when I was a kid, everyone would ask, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know. How about you guys help me? And then I was like, oh, okay, I do know. I want to be a marine biologist. That's dumb. You shouldn't do that. You should do what I think that you should do. And so it's really around conditioning. And then I ended up joining the Army because, I was living with my brother at the time, and he and his wife were both in the Army. And, what do you want to do when you grow up? Join the Army. What do you want to do when you grow up? Join the Army. What do you want to do when you grow up? Join the Army. Well, what did I do? I joined the Army. Right? How did we get into? And then you take conditioning to a very dark place. What did we see with 9/11? How did we get into Iraq? Well, every single news station said 9/11 Iraq, 9/11 Iraq, 9/11 Iraq. Well, we didn't say that Iraq was responsible for 9/11. We just mentioned Iraq and 9/11 in the same sentence for years and years, and then all of a sudden we're at war with Iraq. And so it's conditioning for us to do things that aren't in our best interest in order to fuel that same paradigm that benefits those at the top. And, it's not necessarily for us to say good or bad in a moralizing sense. So it's easy to do so. I think it's better for us to say, hey, does it benefit us? Or does it detract from our health? Or does it detract from our quality of life? I think that if we take morality out of the question and just look at, hey, what benefits us? Well, then we'll find that we live in a much better life, and we'll be able to find that we can really attract ourselves to, paradigms and systems that work much better. Because just like you said, it's so easy to resist because we want to believe. We so want to believe desperately because we see these doctors are so nice and they want to help out, but they're part of a system that, controls them. And if we decide that we don't want to be a part of that system, well, then, we start by asking better questions rather than demanding better answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. So I know you've dealt with some issues, some health issues yourself. Is that how you decided that you wanted to help other people, and what kind of things have you gone through?
Yeah. So when I first, started to heal, well, I first had to heal myself. Right.
Right.
And, because, no leader worth their salt, should be trying to lead anyone anywhere. They haven't led themselves first. And, so I was just letting go of so much stuff I didn't know was there. It would just come up. It's like, oh my God. And, it was all through meditation. And that's what was so phenomenal is that, I used to have a lot of, chronic, PTSD. Felt like I was my own worst enemy. I felt like, for years and years, I would beat myself up at night, just, waylaying myself for all the different mistakes I made and for all the times that I said something that I felt was embarrassing, and just rob myself of hours of quality sleep in order to rake myself over the coals. And once I started learning how to healing, I really just started shedding that over the course of a few weeks. And, I was crying nearly every day, just like tears of joy, just letting all that garbage out. And that's when I realized just so much joy letting that out. It's like, oh my God, I can actually do this for others. And, same man who taught me how to heal, taught me how to heal others. And what's fascinating is, again, if we convince ourselves, of this one paradigm can work for us, well, then, the body's got no ability but to listen. And what happens if that paradigm isn't effective? Well, then we trap ourselves in something that doesn't work. For instance, I was working with a lady in South Africa. She, recently lost her husband, and, he was, deteriorating in a nursing home facility, and they didn't really take care of him. He had big, giant bed sores growing. So she had to go over there and take care of him. Well, he's like 1.5 feet taller than her and about 100 pounds heavier than her. And so just by having to roll him over and try to take care of him for so long, well, she tore her bicep tendon and tore it over and over and over. So for years had extreme pain. She said that she couldn't even reach up, barely, even just try to reach into a cupboard. It'd bring her to her knees. Right? In South Africa, reaching out the right side, window to grab like a parking validation. She couldn't even do that because it'd bring her to her knees. She had to actually open the car door and reach out. Even then, extreme painful. She worked with a orthopedic surgeon. Didn't help. Worked with a chiropractor, didn't help. Went to about 7 different specialists. Only thing she said that they did is just make it worse, make it more painful. I took her through some meditations because, that tap her into, truth and love, because love is what heals, right? So why do we have so much fear in our world? Because love is where true power is. Love is what heals. And if we can tap into the true love of the, infinite power of the soul, well, everything changes. I mean, I've got an incredible testimonial with her as I'm interviewing her and just letting her tell her own story. Within 4 days, she's been dealing with this for years. Within 4 days, she can now reach out her window and not feel any pain. She can now reach up into her cupboard and actually grab something. And, within 2 to 3 weeks, she had 70% of her range of motion back in that arm. And because the body's intelligent enough to heal itself. The problem is, again, coming back to Niels Bohr, coming back to Einstein, coming back to Max Planck, consciousness is primary. Everything is energy. And if we're overlaying a negative conscious awareness, well, then we've got no ability other than to run that program in our lives. And our body can't help but to listen to the voice in our head.
Yeah, well, you essentially you bring up Max Planck and Niels Bohr and those guys because I've become fascinated with them myself recently. And again, going back to, I'm thinking about people I know that have had like chronic pain, and the doctors will tell them it's all in their head. And I think you would probably agree. Yeah, everything is mental, right? It's all in, but they're saying in a dismissive way, like
Yeah.
it's not real. It's all in your head. And you're saying, well, it is very real, but it is a mental state.
Yeah. Well, and that mental state can actually come from, from a spiritual issue, right? Because the soul, the body is effectively a container for the soul, right? And this is where awareness comes from. And this is where our consciousness comes from. And, this is a model for me, right? Nobody knows the truth with capital T. So I have no way to actually show you, direct, evidence of this.
Mhm.
But just the same way that GPS is not the roads that I drive on, it's a meaningful map in order for me to get to my destination. And, the soul itself is in the superset. The soul is the source of our power, and the soul is being drained by, you tune into, news media, and you get nothing but fear porn. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Russia, 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 right? Whatever. Well, then we start to, create blocks. And if our soul is being drained, well, then everything downstream, right? In the subset, well, it's going to break down as a natural consequence. But the soul's at full power, well, then everything downstream will then heal as a natural consequence. In the same way that I was able to, help her, tendon drastically in just 4 days. And, it's incredible when you actually tap into what's true, because your heart can feel it. But there's times where somebody will say something, you get chills up your spine, and it just hammers you, just like, it's a way of basically your soul remembering, hey, this is true. This is true for you. Right. The mind gets, really addled. The mind gets very confused. The mind gets so convinced of its own brilliance that it traps itself. Jordan Peterson, if you're familiar with him, he's doing an Exodus, breakout, and, a bunch of different scholars. And he had this idea of the Luciferian mind, right? Because the Luciferian mind is so convinced of its brilliance, it doesn't care what's right or wrong. It says, oh, I already know all the answers. I'm going to fold my arms just like that toddler and say, hey, this is what's right. This is what's right, because, I'm not willing to actually step out and try it. I'm just going to, go through a logical paradigm and, effectively see, hey, does this make logical sense? And if it doesn't, well, then I'll dismiss it. And coming back to Niels Bohr, if you're familiar with the CIA Gateway Protocol, right, there was a very interesting quote from Niels Bohr where his son reached out to him, just, talking about how confusing quantum mechanics is. And Niels Bohr said, well, look, you're not thinking, you're only being logical.
Yeah. Say that again. I want to hear that.
Yeah. So, Niels Bohr's son, very confused over the quantum mechanics, reached out to his dad. Hey, this is super confusing. What's going on here? He said, hey, son, you're not thinking.
Yeah.
You're only being logical.
It's really, really interesting that you say that, because I was reading some quotes from Einstein the other day, and a lot of them were kind of like letting go of the intellect. He would use his intellect, of course, because he had a really powerful intellect.
Yeah.
But he's like, I really get my greatest insights when I move beyond that, when I kind of let go of that. And, everybody wants to talk about quantum mechanics and quantum theory now, and nobody understands it that I know of. But it's kind of like you have to almost intuit it. You can't really come to it logically.
Perfect. And, when we break down something illogical in a logical framework, well, then it can be nothing more than the traditional Buddhist metaphor of a finger pointing to the moon. Right? If you watch the finger, you'll never see the moon.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. And I'm starting to realize that more and more. And I think, again, what you're talking about with helping people to heal this chronic pain our tradition, we're looking at the wrong end of it, right? We're looking at the body instead of looking at the spirit that's holding that. You talk about unresolved trauma that we carry around, but no one tells us in traditional medicine that's what's causing your problem.
Right. We're looking at the chemistry, and we're not looking at the frequency.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. So how do we move beyond that? How do we start to look at the frequency? How do we determine what is actually causing my problem? I've got, chronic pain in my elbow. How do I get started?
Well, a great way to even get started would be to, if you go to my website at freemefrompains.com, there's a free download. You can go ahead and get a free gift, and I take you through some meditations. And it's an introduction, but they can still be quite powerful. And some people have a hard time, meditating. They feel like they don't meditate right. So the very first one is here are the benefits of meditating. Here's how this works. And then let's take you through a brief meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one is starting to tap you into some of these, these magical awarenesses that can then start to open that up. And, the way that I, often present, why the body breaks down, even though I kind of already did that, but in a way that, people can really latch onto is, again, everything's energy, and all energy needs to flow. And just like water, right? If water's not flowing, it stagnates. Well, and what's attracted to stagnating water? Well, mosquitoes, parasites, bacteria, viruses, fungus, right? What do they do in our body? Well, they drain our lifeblood. They poison our lifeblood. The body breaks down, right? In the mind, well, the same thing. We have fine examples as Americans, of a thought virus. All you have to do is walk into a crowded room, and it's sad when you see a bunch of them getting together and they're actually having a good time. But you can say one of three names. You can say Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, or Donald Trump, and say nothing else. And people immediately act like they just got possessed by an agent of the Matrix, and they start fighting each other. And then you've got these same things in the spiritual world that, instead of draining or poisoning, the lifeblood, they drain the life force. And so if there's an issue in your elbow, right, it could, be tied to a spiritual, a spiritual issue. Your soul is being drained somewhere, or your soul is being blocked somewhere. And having the ability to tune in, you could even, ask your elbow through meditation, hey, what are you trying to tell me? Rather than, most people are just like, oh, my damn elbow. Oh, my stupid elbow. It hurts so much. And here's the thing, as a kid, what hurt me most of all, as much as getting hit really sucked, being screamed at, being yelled at, being demeaned. And we don't realize, if everything's energy, well, guess what? Your elbow has a spirit. You demean the spirit of your elbow, and guess what's going to happen?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I see what you're saying. So yeah, we're cursing our body, right? We're cursing our elbow. Yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned meditation, and it's really interesting because I think meditation is extremely important. I'm always pushing people to meditate, but as you also mentioned, people push back against it. I can't meditate. I can't stop my thoughts. I'm not doing it right. So what do you say to people to say those things? Like, you just don't understand. I just can't meditate.
Yeah. Well, first, let's watch our language, right? As soon as we say can't, well, there's literally nowhere else to go from there. Right? I can't. Well, okay. Well, what if you say, well, I haven't yet learned how to meditate? And then, the reason why it's important to meditate, because again, the brain is the supercomputer of the container. The heart is what connects to the signal to the soul. And so the heart in meditation, you have an intention. And when you give out the intention without necessarily engaging the mind, right, leaving the mind quiet, right? What did Lao Tzu say? To the still mind, the entire universe surrenders. And so when we tap into the signal of the heart that is connected to the signal of the soul, well, then the soul can then reach up and start to ameliorate, right, these issues. Not because we think, oh, I need to go grab a hammer and hammer this nail, and that will help me build this house. But because we just, if you find somebody who can guide you, right, like I can, and what took me so long to find out is, and to figure out myself was, it's not what you learn, right? Any of us can pick up a book about meditating and, learn how to meditate and still get, very few results. So it's not what you learn, it's who you learn it from, right? I can learn how to play basketball on the streets with my friends and know all the ins and outs of basketball, but that's not going to teach me to be, great at the NBA, right? Having an actual NBA head coach teach me will take me, leaps and bounds ahead. Because again, it's not what you know, it's, and what you learn, it's who you learn it from.
Interesting. So tell me about the miracle healing system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it blew my mind when I first engaged with it. And the fact that it was real, like, oh my God, this is real. Like, cause I could literally feel the energy, in my body, like moving around, like what the heck? And the fact that, again, I'm in Utah. I was working with a lady in South Africa with a torn tendon for years. Went to every type of expert that you can think of in order to help, and only made it worse. I took her through a meditation, and within 4 days, no more pain reaching out her window, no more pain reaching up to her cupboard. I mean, so I didn't really know what to call it. So I was like, man, that's a miracle. Okay, a miracle healing system. And so it was really just the a bit of I guess, inadequacy of the language. Just like, I don't know what to call this
Mhm.
other than it is a miracle. So here it is, the miracle healing system. And, I'm working with a lady right now in Denver who's got Lyme disease, right? Lyme disease is one of those things that plagues people, for
Yes. Mhm.
decades, right? Causes neurological issues, causes chronic pain. And, her mind was blown. First, session I took her through, she's like, "Oh my God, I've never felt anything like that before. That was incredible. I've never felt energy like that before." And so this is, again, there's, you can take a Udemy course and learn all the ins and outs logically. But just because you know it logically doesn't know that you know it from your heart and your soul.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, that's really interesting. So as you were talking about that, it reminded me, because I've taken Reiki. People here have heard of Reiki. We've heard of other energy type healing systems. So how does what you do compare to something like that?
Hard to say. I've never been trained in Reiki. So this is one of those things that, I didn't spend a lot of time, delving into a lot of different healing modalities.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why I didn't write off, the great master who taught me how to heal was because, Ed Stracher, is because Peter Sage made me feel safe. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because it was a webinar, about, a webinar about speed reading. Right. And it's like, oh my God, speed reading would totally change my life. So I show up, and then all of a sudden he takes this left turn and starts talking about all this, spiritual stuff. Like, what is going on? Right. And I saw a little smirk on, my mentor's face, just like he's heard it all before. Saying, okay, so there's something real here. Right. Because, mentor, I already trusted him. I already knew that he was at a place that I wanted to be, and then he can help, provide me the steps to get there. And, what I've heard, right? But, I haven't actually experienced it, so I can't really say. But what I've heard from Reiki is a lot of times Reiki can organize the energy of the body a lot, organize the energy of the mind, and you feel good for maybe a little bit. And I don't know how long the lasting effects are. Whereas, when you heal the soul, the not only can they be immediate and lasting, but then you can keep it on, forever. Now that said, if you are, engaging in activities that, say, drive you into a ditch, and then that causes, say, your elbow to, to have chronic pain. If I come in with a wrecker and pull you out of that ditch, and then you're healed, well, if you exhibit those same behaviors, well, guess what? You're probably going to find yourself back in that ditch. So it's also also understanding that we need to change some of our behaviors, or if we are going to still engage in some, because maybe it's necessary, because the work that we do around people who are negative and they are trying to put all their negative energy onto us, well, then just learning how to protect your energy and learn how to clean your energy and do that daily, and create daily practices, right? Clean your energy. That's more important than cleaning your teeth. And I bet we brush our teeth every day, and our energy is what makes up all of us, and so just finding ways that that work with us, finding ways that allow us to start opening our minds. And really the best thing that we can do for ourselves is the second that we get triggered, be like, we want to say that guy's full of it. Say, I don't know what that guy's trying to say. Let me suspend my need to decide what it means, and let me do a little bit of investigating. Let me be skeptical. Sure. Yeah, be skeptical. Nothing wrong with that. But validate and verify.
So is it necessary for people to begin to heal to identify a particular trauma? Like, this is what's caused this? Or is it more of, it sounded like I heard you say, like almost a daily practice, or is it both? How does that work?
Great question. In fact, I would say that if you diagnose yourself and say, this is why I have trauma, it might actually make it harder for you to heal. Right. Because then you're tied to your story. And a lot of times when we're tied to our story, well, we get a lot of secondary gains, right? Why do people bemoan, all their issues? Is it because they're totally in love with crying out and being a victim? Or is it because they actually think that people are going to come to them and say, there, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with that. And they're actually getting the love that they wanted. And that's their way of actually, connecting. And so a lot of people have a stranglehold on that. And if and that's why, you may see a friend, right, or a family member who is struggling and suffering, and you got some brilliant ideas to be able to help them out. And you might share some things, and it's just like hitting a wall, slides off, because you're also not considering their secondary gains. And so the more time that we spend in researching our diagnosis, or holding on to our story, the harder it can be to let go. And so if we understand that we have pain and don't really know why, it's actually a lot easier to heal, because then you've got no blocks, you've got no mental blocks, you've got no story around that you've got to unravel and and let go of.
Interesting. That's really interesting, because I've heard of people doing past life regressions and things of that nature, and and saying, well, once I identified what caused this, then I was able to get over it. But I hear what you're saying. It's kind of more like we can start to really identify, like, okay, this is happening because my father was mean to me 50 years ago, and I'm still holding on to that story and still carrying it around with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the past life regressions, right? Those can be incredibly powerful. And, it's not for me to say how, things are going to work universally for everyone, right? If somebody goes through a regression, it works for them, right? And it ends up healing them, helps them, get over it. Well, great. Awesome. Right. Lean into what works.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I know you weren't saying that we shouldn't do that, but I like, the idea, what you're saying is, I guess it's not really necessary for me to understand exactly what's causing my elbow to hurt, or exactly what's causing me to have this chronic pain, whatever it happens to be, fibromyalgia, whatever. It's like we can just start with clearing and healing.
Yeah, exactly.
So is it, you mentioned that what you do with the Miracle Healing System is more of a long-term thing. So is it, I'm going to learn practices, I assume, from you when I work with you.
So, I don't really need to work with people for, a long amount of time, but what I do is I record the sessions. And so that way they've got them for life. And so that way they can lean on them when they need to. And, when I first learned, how to heal others, heal myself, I listened to them daily. And now I might listen to them, maybe every other week, or, monthly, because I just, once you learn how to ride a bike, you don't really need training wheels anymore. And I might go revisit them if in order to really tap in and really dig into some of the foundational aspects in order to make sure that I've still got the basics down, so I can kind of advance with my own stuff. Sure. But I think with Anna Lee in South Africa, I think it was only 3 weeks. I arthritis. I worked with a Navy SEAL who had arthritis, and within that first session, his arthritis was gone. I still took him through other sessions, and I worked with another military analyst who had to sit in small rooms with terrorists, see on their phone all the gross pictures of like child trafficking, and within a couple of sessions, he just talked about how free he was from his PTSD, how free, and how amazing it was for him, and how now that he's got these skills and these tools to be able to do this forever, just like he can't be more grateful. It's just like, oh my God, right? Because again, there's something almost like you mentioned how we're cursing our body, and it creates almost like a Faraday cage around us. If you're familiar with a Faraday cage, well, it blocks any sort of electronic transmission. So anytime we're trying to send that signal to the source of our power, our soul, well, that darkness that we've now attracted around us is just suppressing it.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned a couple different things you've worked with people on. So you mentioned arthritis. You mentioned the one with the torn tendon. What other types of things have you helped people with?
There was a beautiful, young lady who suffered from a lot of mental anguish. And when she did, she'd get this psychosomatic response where she'd get these bumps that would appear on her skin, and she'd scratch them, and she couldn't help but scratch and itch and get these gnarly scabs all over her. And so what I did is I healed that, whether you call it mental disorder or just mental anguish. So within 2 weeks, right? She was only 2 weeks. She was in New Zealand even. So, I've worked with, been blessed to work with people across 5 different continents. And So, once that went away, well, then all the, symptoms went away. And then she was able to actually get in a relationship, right? She didn't, she had no interest in boys because she was very afraid. Living in New Zealand where it's super hot, wearing all, long sleeve shirts everywhere she goes. And, I, worked with a lady who suffered from an impacted spine and pain from that. And the pain from the spine, well, then it ended up, twisting her hips a little bit, which then went and pulled on her leg, and her leg then pulled on her knee. So she had a whole lot of problems.
Right.
And what was complicated with that is she was also, an energy healer. But most energy healers don't know how to properly protect their energy. So what happens is, you go and clean, this darkness off of somebody. Well, that's like taking the lunch away from a lion. What do you think that lion's going to do to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we don't know how to properly protect ourselves, well, then, we'll find that we'll start breaking down, and then we'll start, absorbing their darkness. And in fact, there was a great, story about Gabor Mate. Are you familiar with Gabor Mate?
I know the name.
Yeah. So he, is an MD. He started, finding a big awakening in ayahuasca retreats, and he took a whole gaggle of people to South America rather, and meeting these shamans. And so everyone's going to go to the circle, and they stop him. They're like, hey, you can't join the circle. He's like, what do you mean I can't join the circle? I brought everyone here. And they go, yeah, you can't join the circle. You got way too much darkness on you. And they explained it to him. It's just that as he's helping people heal, he doesn't know how to protect himself. So he's just like a sponge and just absorbing it all.
Wow. Yeah, I've actually heard of people that are energy healers that do, suffer themselves because they're not able to protect themselves or clear or I guess or both.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's and again, you can learn how to heal, and you can maybe even learn how to protect yourself. And if you find the right people, you can learn how to do both. And because it's not what we learn, it's who we learn it from. And when we tap into the true power of the soul, right? The guy who taught me is an inventor. He invented the microchip that went into every like NATO rocket. And that was before he became a healer. And so this guy, is an engineer. He's got an engineer mind. And he's the one telling me to get the hell out of my mind and tap into my heart. And this guy's probably more brilliant than I am, but he's telling me to quiet the mind. And so I was like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to that paradigm that we have, that it's all about the intellect, it's all about the ego, it's all about the brain, it's all about the physical.
Yeah.
And you're coming at it from a completely different point of view. Was as you said, we've known we used to know it intuitively as mankind for a very long time. We forgot. We kind of started coming back around to it about 100 years ago, I guess. And then like the 1920s, all those brilliant guys are like, okay, it's not about just the brain. It's not about just the physical part of it. And so, but and then you're going back to what you said about the pharmaceutical industry and the health industry. It's not really designed to heal us.
Right. Exactly. Or to cure even, right. Yeah. It's there to prolong, and even, if you look at, cancer treatments, right. Where did we come up with chemotherapy? Well, we saw, in war, what mustard gas did to people. It shrunk their organs. You're like, okay, let's go ahead and put mustard gas in people's veins, and let's just hope that it kills the disease before it kills them.
Yeah. So one of the things, I asked you some questions that, in the pre-interview, some questions that you thought would be good. And one of the questions you had was, what does it mean that thoughts weaken the mind? So what do you mean when you say that?
Well, I mean, we kind of been talking and dancing around that idea a lot. But, this is Lao Tzu, right? Thoughts weaken the mind, right? That's actually in the Tao Te Ching, right? Because when we get so convinced of our own brilliance, well, then we'll tune out what's actually true and what's actually real, right? Mm-hmm. Because again, we'll be like, okay, does that make logical sense? And what did Niels Bohr say? Well, are you even thinking, or are you just being logical?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's it's a hard I know it's a hard concept for me, and I'm just starting to really understand, trying to get out of the head so much and to feel more into things, and to trust the heart, and to tap into that higher part of ourself. So it sounds like, from what I hear you saying, like the meditation that we're doing, it's kind of quieting that part of us down so we can hear from our spirit.
Yeah. Well, and then, as I guide people, I can actually tune in. I can tell when your mind's active, and it really help guide you to quiet your mind. So that way, and so that's one of the benefits of working with me personally versus working with like a recorded, right, meditation, is that I can actually help guide you. Okay, your mind's active, allow that to go to zero, right, in order so you don't block yourself, and then give you tools for your mind to focus on in order to allow it to just quiet down and just allow your heart to expand and open up.
So that's the thing about working with you personally. So you're able to pick up on the fact that someone's mind is still active, and then help them to do that. Because I know a lot of people, they struggle with meditation because they're like, okay, I have to stop my thoughts, right? And so then there's, oh, I'm having a thought. Then they beat themselves up over having a thought. Then they're like, well, I might as well get up and leave because this isn't working anyway.
That's such a brilliant point. And the thing is it's not about stopping thoughts, because if you use thoughts to stop thoughts, well, then you're just thinking,
right?
And so if you bring energy to something, you energize it. You bring neutrality to something, you neutralize it. And there's a brilliant man by the name of Jose Silva. You ever heard of him? The Silva method.
I've heard of
him.
Yeah.
So the Silva method is this idea of creating like a window, right, in your mind, and see the accomplished event outside of that. And so I use that frame for some people who have a hard time quieting their mind. Is as you close your eyes, well, just picture a window. And all the thoughts that come through, just imagine they're birds, or imagine that they're animals that just float right by the window. Thank you for making my view look better, but I have no interest in following you. It's not about not having thoughts; it's about not following your thoughts. And because the more that you can allow your mind to observe your thoughts without following your thoughts, the stronger it becomes. Because the mind is meant to be an antenna, right, like a rudder. Right, the heart is the source of power. Right, the heart, and we've measured this, that the heart's magnetic field extends 3,000 times further than the electrical impulses of the brain. And then we can look at that, and since we live in a fractal universe, we can look at that in a planet. Right, look at Jupiter. Jupiter is nothing but this chaos of electrical storms. But does that lightning escape the atmosphere? Not that I've seen. But that magnetosphere, right, that comes from the core, that comes from its heart, well, it extends beyond the asteroid belt, it extends beyond Mars, and it reaches Earth's orbit.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, and so without the other planets and their their magnetic the magnetosphere protecting us from the sun's radiation, right? So it's not just our ozone layer that protects us; it's also the other planets as well. And that's what the idea of the law of attraction is, that you're sending the heart signal out to attract it to you.
Okay, so let's talk about the law of attraction, because that's something that's I think kind of intriguing to people. And they say, and you get people from on both sides of it. Of course, some people say, well, I've been trying to practice the law of attraction, it's not working for me. I'm still poor, I'm still not well. So how do we start to tap into that?
Yeah, well, I mean, such a great question. And the thing is if we're trying to become abundant and wealthy, and we decide that the only way to be wealthy is to have money, well, aren't we just saying that we're poor, and we're just doubling down on the fact that we're poor? But if we are then showing gratitude for everything in our lives, is abundance maybe somebody coming up and giving you a free gift, right? Is abundance maybe coming up and somebody having an enlightening conversation, and you walk away just feeling better, feeling lighter, feeling stronger, right? And then the more you give gratitude, well, then the more, just like a little kid, right? Are you going to give a little kid a giant responsibility, or are you give them a small responsibility and build them up for a big responsibility? And it seems, right, again, nobody knows the truth of the capital T, but it seems, and relying on people like Joe Dispenza, they really talk about how the quantum realm is run on a rule set. And that rule set is, if you can see yourself, as Neville Goddard even talks about, see yourself as the wish already fulfilled, but not just see it, feel it, right? Because feeling is the secret. And so imagine that your goal is to get a house, right? Your dream house, and that dream house, what would it feel like to be in that house the day after you signed all the paperwork? Right? Maybe your family's there. Maybe you can smell the smells, right? The more variables you can put in there, and the more that you're going to attract it to you. And this is the way that the law of attraction has been brought to me, and been told to me. And to kind of share a bit of an anecdote, I we don't always get to see around the bend in the river. So things can show up as abundance, and we don't necessarily understand that it's abundance yet.
Right.
And I joined a coaching program with a man by the name of Pete Vargas, and it was a Stage to Scale. And so I'm going through this, and I'm doing my manifestation stuff daily. And at the end of this coaching program, right, a bunch of people there, but he said, "Hey, we're going to do something that we've never done before. We're going to give you guys a 5K gift." Okay, well, that wasn't 5K in my wallet, but it was 5K gift. And he said, "Oh, you know what? You just have to make it to Miami or Denver." Okay, well, you know what? There's a friend of mine who I'd really like to connect with in Denver. And then not only that, but I was just interviewed by somebody, on their podcast, and they said, "Hey, let me know if you're ever in Denver."
Hmm.
Okay, so I reached out to him and said, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to be in Denver." He said, "Oh, great, man. I'll go ahead and put you in my guest bedroom." Oh, well, look at that, another gift. And then when I was at the workshop there in Denver, as I was about to leave the first day, he texted me and said, "Hey, I'm at my friend's house. You should come over." Okay, well, that's good timing. So I go over there. Well, she's suffering from Lyme disease. Not only that, but she's got a whole slew of people in her field who could need my help.
Mm.
And so as I'm talking to her, we are in a lot of alignment. And I started working with her, and now she's already reaching out to her friends, and her friends are already showing interest in working with me. And so abundance may not just be that a suitcase full of cash is going to fall into your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a matter of training your reticular activating system to be grateful for, if you are trying to manifest abundance and something good happens for you, thank it, show gratitude. So you're reinforcing that, so something else can come in, bigger and better and greater, and start building momentum.
I love that. Thank you for that story. I think that's really important, and it's an understanding I just recently came to. I forgot what it was. I was reading very recently, the last couple of weeks, and they were talking about different forms of abundance, because we tend to think of abundance as money, right? As stuff like that. But it said you could have the abundance of great communications, as you brought up, or someone might give you a gift. It could come in that form. And most of us, we all pretty much have abundance in various ways in our lives. We tend to focus on what we don't have. So even those people that have a lot of wealth, then they tend to focus on other things that they don't have. They might be extremely lonely. And that gratitude practice that you talked about, which I think is really important, understanding, okay, yeah, I do have a lot going on for me, and this might come to me in a different form, and it's kind of actually, it was more fun when it comes to you in a form like it did for you. That whole roundabout thing, it makes it more interesting.
Well, and not only that, but it's also the way that life works, right? There's no such thing as a straight line, except in the mind of a human, right? We say the shortest distance between to any 2 points is a straight line. Well, try driving to the grocery store in a straight line and see how well that works.
Yeah.
Right. And just like a river, it winds. The thing is we may be, trying to manifest abundance, and then, scarcity pops up. Well, then what do we do? Do we react to our outer world? Or do we realize that it's our inner world, consciousness, right? What Max Planck say, consciousness is primary. So then if we close our eyes and say, okay, I don't see beyond this bend in the river, so that must mean that in a non-linear dynamic, something better, there's a shortcut here I just don't see. So something great is happening for me. And if we already know that we're on the right river of life, and we know it's going to take us to our destination, but it bends in a way in which is counterintuitive, do we really freak out if we already know that we're on the right river?
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Because again, the older I get, the more I can see that the things that I thought were detours or obstacles actually led me to a better place. But at the time, I couldn't see it. Yeah. And that's the trust, that's the faith to have it, that we're on the right river, right? So when you're on a river and the river is flowing, you don't really have to do anything. The river is going to take you to where you need to be. So we don't have to fight. We can just kind of enjoy the ride.
Yeah, 100%.
So Joshua, how do people, if they want to reach you, they want to work with you, how do people work with you?
Yeah, well, again, that same website, freemefrompains.com, right? It's a landing page with a few testimonials, so you can see what other people are saying. And there's a great way to download that free gift.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great way to just go ahead and get started. and get started with this. If you already know for a fact, hey, I need to reach out to this guy, well, then you'll see a button there to set up a healing plan, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. So it's freemefrompains.com.
Yep.
People can reach you there. Joshua, thanks so much for being here today. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. I know it's going to help a lot of people to really open up to possibilities, because again, we can become so frustrated with certain things in our lives, and we go to these so-called experts that aren't helping. So this is an alternative, or actually supplement to whatever people are doing.
Well, and the thing is I was so hard-headed for so long. I was so convinced of my brilliance, right? I was right there in the depths of, what Jordan Peterson would say, the Luciferian, intellect that only made my life worse. Yeah. And so there's nothing special about me. I just simply had the right mentors. That's it. Just like, if you look at people who are succeed in business, well, it's probably because they also had the right mentors. And so it's all about, who you learn it from. And so nothing special about me. And if you want to, learn how to heal, well, then reach out. Let's get you on that path.
Sounds great. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for holding the space. Really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, enjoy your afternoon.
Oh, thanks, man.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grief2growth.circle.so. That's grief2growth.circle.so to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.